Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Our session today is called Building a Bridge Program to Apprenticeship. And our presenter today is Jody Cobbler. And Jody is the Director for Adult Education at BVCOG, which is Brazos Valley Council of Governments. And Jody's going to talk to us today about the Bridge program that they have developed and been working on, and to give us a little insight on lessons learned and things like that.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks so much for joining this session today. As Wendy said, I'm Jody Cobbler. I'm the Adult Education and Literacy Grant Manager for BVCOG and the Director of the Brazos Valley Consortium. I've been in AL about 5 years, and before that, I spent about 15 years in workforce development and Title I. Today, we're going to talk about how the AL program at Brazos Valley, we built a pre-apprenticeship program that is actually a bridge to registered apprenticeship. You're going to learn about registered apprenticeships and the benefits to our students, why a pre-apprenticeship is pretty important to gaining entry into a registered apprenticeship. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to research how you find apprenticeships in your area and talk to them about the benefits of becoming a registered apprenticeship. Today, we're also going to talk about collaborating across the WIOA titles and braiding the funds through co-enrollment, and gain some insight on how we did the pre-apprenticeship class that also was an integrated education and training class. So there's the objectives. Like I said, we'll be talking about all things apprenticeship today and how we can make that into an IET for AL program. We'll start talking about what we did in Brazos Valley. A couple of years ago, TWC AEL released a grant that they wanted to build capacity in a area where somebody had an AEL fund to have more AEL students go into registered apprenticeships. And the way that they felt like we could do that was through a pre-apprenticeship program. So when the grant came out, everybody at Workforce Solutions, well, I said Brazos Valley Council of Governments, but it's also Workforce Solutions Brazos Valley Board. So I'm a board staff who is assigned to the AEL department. And we're a small board, so the department consists of me. And so I knew kind of for our area that we had a construction boom and that we definitely had a shortage of electricians in the Brazos Valley. And I pulled the labor statistics on that, and we're looking at about a 6% growth rate for electricians across the Brazos Valley until 2032. And that's about twice the rate of any other occupation that's in construction at this time. And this was according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The other issue that we're facing with the electrician shortage is that more electricians are retiring or leaving the job altogether each year to go into different type of work, mainly either teaching, becoming recruiters, or starting in middle school. They will begin the career messaging about electrical and electricians. Becoming an electrician is a good occupation for a lot of our students that we work with. They already are probably working in the construction industry, and so this just kind of helps them take that next step in that career pathway. A fella by the name of Long was talking about the electrification of America and how this is creating generational career opportunities because as we build more electrical cars, as we rely on the nation's electrical grid, building chargers for electric vehicles, all of that is going to require more electricians. And so we know that this is a long-standing, good-looking job prospect. When the grant came out and I did the kind of labor market research on it and figured out, okay, electricians are what we would like to go for, I definitely had to make sure that the industry was in position for what I needed. I got a group of electrician companies together, and a lot of them in this area are mom and pop shops. They're not big corporations. We had lunch and I had them come in and we talked to them about what do they look for in people that they hire? What are they looking for as far as education level, certification level, skill level? We got really honest about, well, what if they have an offender background? Or what if they maybe don't speak the best of English, but they have right to work? We just kind of pulled out all the nuts and bolts about what they look for in a hire. Then we asked them, what kind of competencies do these students need to have in order for you to be able to hire them? And so they talked a lot about safety and OSHA being one of the definite things that the students needed was to have some OSHA training. Identifying the industry needs is definitely your first step in setting up a pre-apprenticeship. You definitely want to bridge that gap between the adult education, the workforce, and the employers. And you want to focus on serving populations that have limited experience. Lately, I think we're calling them underserved groups or underrepresented groups, or even those that are transitioning their careers. And a lot of these are the type of students that we deal with on a daily basis in our adult ed programs. By focusing on serving those certain populations, you definitely have to outreach and promote the program with marketing. We did a lot of commercials. We did flyers everywhere, just paper in the town, letting everybody know, talk to all the employers in the area about the class. And we actually formed agreements with two of the employers that they would give first look at our students as they came out. And one of the biggest things that we did for that was we had an electronic form on our website. And so that would track everybody that was interested. They could fill out an information form and it would give us enough information to kind of determine if they were initially eligible. Because that's kind of the next step is if you're outreaching to them and then you start getting them, you have to start screening for eligibility, for compatibility, because sometimes they might be eligible for the program, but they're really not compatible. The schedule isn't going to work for them at this time, or they just don't have the time to commit, et cetera, et cetera. When you focus on those populations, we went to specific neighborhoods, we went to specific apartment complexes, but the biggest thing that helped us the most was a TV interview that I had done, and then the paper printed an article about it. Well, a local influencer found that article and she shared it on her Facebook page. She was a former VJ here in the Brazos Valley and had about 5,000 followers. And then that one post was shared over 2,000 times in less than 3 days. We started this program in January 23 and kind of got a slow start, didn't have a lot of interest. And then by July, of 24, this local influencer just shared this post out of the goodness of her heart, wanting to help our community. And we received about 500 entries in about a week. So we got overrun in the beginning, well, kind of in the middle of the program, started slow and then picked up pace pretty quickly. How did you select the employers to meet with? What I did was I went to apprenticeship.gov. It's the apprenticeship finder. And I pulled the list from that website and I just started calling folks and setting up meetings because I've had business services training. I know a lot of y'all don't work for the workforce board. You're working for adult ed. And so business services, you may not understand what that means, but basically that means you reach out to employers and you talk to them about what they're looking for in a hire, what they need as far as training. Set some meetings up so you can establish a rapport and build some trust so that they can come to you when they know you have a class that is putting out students that they need with the training and skills that they require. How do you actually get this done? Because with AEL funds, we don't get a ton of money compared to other titles of WIOA. WIOA has Title I, which is the workforce centers, the American Job Centers. Those programs that run out of those centers are Title I WIOA programs. Those have a little bit different eligibility guidelines than we do in AEL. However, you can co-enroll students because they have three pots of money for Title I, and one of those pots is called the youth pot. And as long as your student has not turned 25 years old and has taken GED classes, has a barrier to employment, such as criminal involvement, they may have a baby, they may receive SNAP benefits or had a parent in prison, whatever your board's barriers are, that student could pretty easily be co-enrolled into Title I and already co-enrolled into Title II AEL. When you collaborate with your Title I workforce partner, you're tapping into their money. We get a little over $1,000 on a cost per student. They have closer to $10,000 per student that they can spend. And they can pay for occupational skills training. And pre-apprenticeship can be paid for through your 231 funds because it's an IET at the end of the day. When you collaborate with your employers and your workforce business service team and your workforce operators, and they're all different contractors in different board areas, and your workforce boards, because even if the workforce board doesn't have an AEL grant, they have somebody that knows about AEL and can link you up with the appropriate people. When we were preparing to do the pre-apprenticeship program and I was writing the grant for it because it was a competitive grant, I talked to the employers. We did surveys. We had lunch that one day and had focus groups come in. I talked to the community about what kind of jobs were people seeing that had the most positions open. I looked at labor market information to look at the trends, especially locally. And then I started talking to different folks. I talked to my local community college about the training that they could offer. I talked to different employers. I even talked to a labor guy, a union guy, which electricians do have a union, but I think the closest place to us is in Houston because we're in the Brazos Valley, which is Bryan College Station. I talked to other community organizations about students that they may have that they could refer to us. Food bank. We do the food bank presentations every time they have a new class. We went out and talked to high school groups, senior classes. We talked to the alternative schools. We talked to the Boys and Girls Club, different community organizations like that that you could potentially source students from. And then we established some formal agreements through non-financial agreements, also known as memorandums of understanding or MOU. A lot of times in AEL, you'll use an MOU because the church is going to let you use space for the classroom. And so, same type of MOU, you just specify in there that you're training students according to their guidelines and that there's no guarantee of hire, but that they would be willing to participate throughout the student's training and mock interviews or assist the student in preparing for other interviews, taking a look at them to maybe accept them into their apprenticeship program. And the beautiful thing about having a Title I partner is that that Title I partner can pay for certain things for the employer. So that will ultimately save the employer money, which is exactly what that employer is looking for. I don't know how many of you have worked with employers. I know for workplace literacies and stuff like that in adult ed, but if you should have like a workforce background or if you were ever in business services, you know that employers want to save money. And when you go to them and you say, look, I can save you money, because if you do have a student that's co-enrolled, the workforce can pay that student to work there for a certain amount of weeks. It's called a subsidized employment, and that costs the employer nothing. And they kind of try before they buy, which I hate to say that, but it's really true because they can get a sense of the student. They can get a sense of what kind of worker that student would be. They can offer advice. They can try to help the student because that is exactly what a subsidized employment is for, is to help that student put something on their resume, but also to learn the soft skills needed to get along on the job.
I wanted to ask for those participants that are new, what do you recommend that they do in terms of who do they reach out to even find out who their Title I contact would be locally? Do you have any
Right.
recommendations on how to do that?
Yes.
Because I know sometimes people have a hard time figuring out who to even call because they're
Yes.
so new, they have no contacts yet.
Yes. And sometimes it's hard to talk to boards. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that at all. Sometimes it's hard to talk to boards, but they are supposed to be a partner of yours. It's a requirement of WIOA that AEL and workforce boards partner, even if the board does not hold the grant. Okay, so there's the link on how to locate your workforce board. How does that work with 243 funding when one of the goals is to find unsubsidized employment? I hadn't mentioned that before, so you didn't miss anything. With 243 funds, you cannot do a pre-apprenticeship with 243 funds. It's only for 231 funds. But students that are under 243, if they have a Social Security card and they have right to work in the United States, then they can be co-enrolled into Title I. You just can't pay for the pre-apprenticeship. They would have to get it from somewhere else. The model that we used for the pre-apprentice class, which was also an IET. So we did get IET credit for doing this pre-apprentice class. There's a couple of components that we built this out of, and part of that, or most of that, actually came from the feds. And so they had released a pre-apprentice model in a 10. So Training and Employment Notice, TEN, number 23-23 describes quality pre-apprenticeship programs. So the model that we used, we were doing outreach and we had the electronic form letting us know when we had interested participants. From that list, we would kind of initially look at eligibility because two things on this grant that were special and different than just a regular AEL 231 grant was that in order to get into the program, they had to have a high school diploma and they had to have a social security card. They had to be over 18 as well. And so those were the questions that we put in the electronic form so that we could kind of sort out, okay, they're not 18, they don't have a high school diploma. And then a lot of them, I don't know how, but when that Facebook post went out, it went out across Texas. We had over 150 entries from people outside of our area wanting to drive to Bryan College Station to take this class. So from that list, we started having information sessions. And basically, we would just hold a session. We would talk about the program, what the expectations were, and whether or not the student was interested beyond that point, because they were going to have a lot of stuff to go through to get into the pre-apprentice program. After the information session, if they still indicated interest, then we put them through regular AEL core intake and assessment, comprehensive assessment. We tested them, we did the intake, the 3-hour orientation, and then they did another orientation specifically for the electrical pre-apprentice program. So you see, I said EPA, that was what we shorted it to, because electrical pre-apprentice program, you try to say that 3 times and you'll definitely get tongue-tied. We did an EPA orientation, just like really hammering in, these are the times of the class, and the class was every day. They had to come to class 5 days a week for at least 3 to 4 hours. One of the classes was a night class, and it actually went for much longer. It went for several months, and you would not believe the retention that we had. It was crazy good. I think overall, we finished the program December 31st, and I think we had 121 go through the program, and we retained 92% of them. So that was really, really good. Our adult ed students are perfect for apprenticeships because of the lot in life that they've had and what got them into an adult ed program to start with. We know that adult ed students are more committed, that they seek out training when they want it. We felt that this was a good opportunity to put adult ed students in apprenticeships and provide them with the same opportunities that people with high school diplomas had. The inclusivity and accessibility was really an issue, I think. Based on just the data from the types of people that attended our program, it shows you that it's very diverse and multicultural. Electricians are needed around the world. And so even if you have an internationally trained professional, why couldn't they join this IET to maybe get them back on that career pathway? And so pre-apprenticeships, they serve as an effective tool for students that are facing barriers, that need those practical and foundational skills to be able to fully participate in the workforce. After the EPA orientation, those that remained, which we did lose a few in those first couple of times, but that's okay. The way that we set it up was so that even if they're eligible, maybe they're not suitable. And we set up a couple of different meetings to ensure that they were committed and that they would show up on time and when we asked them to. After that, we did a 12-hour onboarding class. They were required to come to this class. It was 3 days and it was 4 hours a day. They, in the class, studied study skills. They learned about test taking skills. They talked more about work readiness skills and what they would be learning as part of this pre-apprenticeship class. Because it's an IET, we had to have 3 components for it to count and be an intensive service to these students. We did a short-term skills training, and that was based on the NCCER core credential, which is the National Center for Construction Excellence and Research. And that is a nationwide credential that all construction employers recognize. They also did a OSHA class inside of the EPA class. We did OSHA 10, It's the 10-hour class. We probably should have done OSHA 30 because employers seem to like that a little bit better, but we did do the OSHA 10, and once they passed that test to get their OSHA certification, then that counted as their MSG. Then we had the contextualization to the industry. We did use longtime teacher to do that, very experienced teacher, and he did an excellent job of contextualizing it and providing the AEL support that the students needed. Because even though they had a high school diploma, they were still considered basic skills deficient. And so we know that if we increase basic skills, then we increase wages. There's a direct correlation between the better basic skills you have, the more money that you're going to make over your lifetime. The third component of the IET was the work readiness training. We had the employers come in to do mock interviews. We had some of our staff from the Workforce Center do mock interviews just to give the students some practice and familiarity with it so that they would not be so nervous when they did go for interview. They'd be like, oh, yeah, I already had this before. I know what to say. A lot of that work readiness training was on the soft skills and on the interview skills and on filling out applications. You would be surprised if you just give them a blank job application, they don't know how to fill it out. So a lot of it was teaching them how to fill out that job application and how to do a resume.
You
Yeah.
mentioned that your AEL instructor contextualized the material. How did the instructor go about doing that? Is it just a skill that he already had? Did he use textbooks that the workforce training was using? What did that instructor do to contextualize?
Yes, ma'am. So he went through the NCCER has a workbook, and they have 8 units. I think it's 8. And every unit he would go through with the technical teacher, and they would talk about, okay, when I was doing this part of the training, it seemed like maybe they didn't quite grasp that concept. Can you kind of review it and make sure they understand how it applies to the job? And then a lot of the contextualization was actually hands-on training. Our skill trainer, we had classes in 2 different counties, and he would travel and he would bring all the tools that they needed, and they learned how to use those power tools and the safety precautions behind all of them. And they actually learned that some electrical emphasis was built into the NCCER core curriculum, and they built a wall and they ran wires through it so that they could plug in and see if they did it right. And that was really cool. They were super proud of those walls. That was one of the really cool things about our skills trainer, was that they were willing to kind of go above and beyond and really show these students what it would really take to be on the job in a construction industry.
Was there any specific skills that were an issue for your students? Like, was it math or reading, or did you find anything that was popping up as a general skill that your students were deficient in?
Yes, definitely the math. That was something, especially like learning how to read a measuring tape. That's fractions, and they have to be able to add and subtract fractions. And so our contextualized instructor is also our GED math instructor, and he's really, really, really good. So yeah, they definitely went through a lot of math to get ready to be able to pass the portion of the unit where they had to read and calculate fractions based on the measuring tape. The benefits for apprentices. And like I was saying earlier, adult ed students are really well suited to become apprentices. They are more committed, they're more energized, they're more driven to success because they want more out of life. It's an earn while you learn model. They don't have to not work so they can go to school. They can work and they can learn at the same time and make money. During the apprenticeship, they're going to earn industry recognized credentials. And that is something that's portable. It can go anywhere. I've heard stories already of a couple of our youth. I'm going to say youth because the majority of the students that we served were under 25. They went through one apprenticeship program and then another one offered them more money per hour. So they jumped ship, but they picked up the apprenticeship over there. And so that's the good thing about it. Even if they need to move around or whatever, they can join another apprenticeship and not lose any time. During the apprenticeship, there's career advancement opportunities, especially if the boss sees that they're a good, reliable worker, they're going to be getting raises. I think our apprentices started out about $16.50 an hour. And depending on how many units they get completed or how quickly they're moving through some of the learning materials, they will get raises for that. And of course, they'll have job security and higher wages. An electrical apprenticeship is 4 years. At the end of 4 years, what you started making $16 an hour, 4 years later, you're going to be making close to $30 an hour. I don't know of any other occupation that you can basically about double your salary in just 4 years. We talked about too the employer benefits, because say you have an employer that's not an apprenticeship, but he's doing a school, he's paying for it himself, and he's training his people the way that he wants them to be trained. If he would become a registered apprenticeship and we could co-enroll students into Title I, place them there, then the workforce contractor will be able to pay for much more than just subsidized employment. They'll also be able to pay for the apprentices training, which typically the employer pays for. So that's a savings to the employer. There's less turnover in apprenticeships as well. The employer has less cost because they are not constantly having to hire and retrain. They get to train them how they want. Some apprenticeships use community colleges or local training providers to do the training for them, and some of them do it in-house. As long as they have a qualified instructor, they can do it in-house. We want it to be accessible. We want apprenticeships to give students, workers, access to those federal and state resources so that they can learn a skill, earn some money while they're doing it, and become self-sufficient. That's the goal of WIOA, is to help our students and help our participants become self-sufficient. And they have to be able to have the skills to earn a living wage. This pre-apprenticeship will do just that. And employers love hiring pre-apprentices because they know that they've already been pre-screened, they're ready to work, and that they've already been trained. If you're working with an employer now, maybe doing a workplace literacy or something like that, and they kind of have an in-house school, all you have to do is reach out to your local workforce board. They have an apprenticeship person there, and they can start the process. Ultimately, TWC Apprenticeship Texas will take over, and they will help the employer do all of the federal paperwork. They will submit the federal paperwork for them and get it all done, so the employer has very little to have to contribute and will reap all sorts of benefits. Another benefit is a tax break. Certain populations give certain tax breaks to apprenticeships. So if they've hired anybody from the choices population or from adult ed population or an underrepresented population, then they can get a tax break up to $2,500 per employee for up to 5 employees. That's $12,500 that they don't have to pay that year. And I think when you go and if you're talking to employers, you start with the money, you're going to get their ear. Definitely. That's what they're all about, is saving money. When you're setting up a pre-apprenticeship program, we've kind of talked about reach out to the apprenticeships in your area, talk to the employers, talk to the community-based organizations, the nonprofits in your area. There might be a young man out there that's running a boot camp to try to help other young men in his neighborhood. And you just never know what kind of grassroots organization you might run across. But you definitely want to set your program up to where you're operating something that is effective and is efficient. For your program administration, you definitely want to use some strategic processes, come up with a strategic plan, maybe a few goals, and how each goal is going to contribute to your overall goal or mission. You definitely want to set up your oversight structures because people don't do what you expect, they do what you inspect. If you're relying on a training provider to be giving this test, but you're not getting any test scores, well, then that's definitely an oversight structure that you would need to put into place to make sure that you're getting what you need from them. You definitely want to put something in place to track the progress and track the performance metrics that have been earned by the students. We had a student that he had trouble with one unit test. He just could not pass it. He tried and he tried and he tried. And so we said, okay, you need a tutor session. And our contextualized / math instructor sat down with him and went through and studied with him and showed him the way to be able to pass that test. And he finally was able to pass it. Being aware of where your students are and what their struggles are. And you're not going to know that unless you're tracking their progress and their metrics. When you're looking for somebody to do the training, that's definitely a choice that needs some thought. You definitely want the trainer to be able to do the training when you want them to do it. You don't want to have to wait on a certain time of year or a semester to pass. You definitely want to have classes that are convenient to your students. We surveyed everybody during orientation, asked them AM or PM. But you want to look at the curriculum and at the lesson plans and at the syllabi and make sure that the schedule is being represented through AEL contextualization and to the content standards that we're held by. You want to make sure that the instructors are qualified, that they have experience in the field, maybe some mentors in the field that could help along your students, especially those facing a lot of barriers. You want to make sure that they have access to the tools that they need. Sometimes a school might be new and they just don't have the tools built up yet. So you want to make sure that they have the tools, the equipment, and the facility that they need to be able to learn. You definitely want to include the experiential and the project-based learning, the hands-on. Those students were so proud of those walls that they built. I'm sure they're still talking about them. That hands-on learning is really, I think, one of the better ways that our students learn. Providing the support services and the intensive case management. And unfortunately, AEL, we don't have the case managers to be able to do that to that level. But guess who does? Title I workforce. What we're doing is we have space at all of our sites for Title I workforce career navigators to come in, meet with the students that they have co-enrolled, do intake on students. They come and present to new classes and talk about the benefits of being in the WIOA Title I program. The Title I program can provide support services. They can do gas cards. They can pay for the GED. If the student needs to take a GED, they can pay for that test. They can pay for work-related clothing, tools, anything that student needs to go to work, they can pay for. Plus, they can pay for part of the employer's portion, therefore saving the employer money. Make sure that you have an approved curriculum. Make sure that you're facilitating your entry with your RAP, your registered apprenticeships. We had a bunch of students finish November, December, but the next class being taken in one of the biggest apprenticeships we have here isn't until April, May. So we're like, dang it, we missed that window. So maybe find out when those entry points are into those registered apprenticeships so that you can facilitate that and build your class schedule around it. And the good thing is that word travels fast. And so when you have one employer that's happy, he's going to tell everybody else, and then everybody else is going to want you to do the same things. I would be prepared to get run over just in case it happens. Achieving success. How we did it was we used data. I pull data every day. I'm a data nerd, and I look at it in a way that is for continuous improvement. I put in place a process where I'm using data every day saying, okay, where are the hours? Why is this student missing 3 days of class this week? What's going on? By pulling the POPs and the MSGs and really digging into who had great attendance, who didn't. We had strong employer engagement, and we utilized every opportunity we could for feedback. We sent out surveys, we had the meetings, we participated in National Apprenticeship Week, where we had an apprenticeship come in and talk to other employers about becoming an apprenticeship and the benefits of that. I regularly reviewed the curriculum and thought, okay, we need to make the change from OSHA 10 to OSHA 30, stuff like that. You just definitely always want to be getting feedback and looking at the data to make sure that things are going the way that you wrote that they would and that you want them to. Make sure that you're communicating with those employers and that you're aligning your program with what they need. And then, of course, with the students, our adult students need a lot of support to get through programs like this because a lot of times they never thought they could. And so they want to give up fast, they want to quit when it gets hard. And you need that intensive navigation support that only Title I career navigators can provide. And they can also help with the barrier removal. Achieving success, it wasn't easy. It was supposed to be a year-long program. It took us a little over 2 years to get it all done. It was a lot of fun, though. Here's a picture of one of the graduating classes out at Monterey Mushroom. We did it on the employer's location. And then a picture after the students finished, we actually had a reverse job fair for them where they stood behind the tables and the employers kind of wandered around the room and talked to the students about what they knew. And we actually had 2 hires from that. And then we held a graduation. We had 121 go through the program over a 2.5 year course of time, and 28 of them came to walk, and it was crazy. It was standing room only. Y'all know how these graduations, they're just fantastic. And so any opportunity to celebrate, I say you should.
This is all great information, Jody. Thanks so much for sharing.
I just want to see more students be successful in adult education, and I think this is a great way to do it and help the employers as much as we're helping the students.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.